to Words on Music, presented by your Anchorage Symphony Orchestra. I'm Susan Wingrove-Reed, the education consultant for the orchestra and also the principal keyboard player. And boy, do we have a great season ahead. So I'd like to share some information with you about opening night's performance program. To start off this exciting concert is a work by Carlos Simon. He was born in Washington, D.C., but raised in Atlanta. And he comes from 3 generations of preachers, his great-grandfather, his grandfather, and his father. And he said, my dad, he always gets on me, wants me to be a preacher. But I always tell him, music is my pulpit. That's where I preach. He's a graduate of Morehouse and Georgia State and the University of Michigan, where he earned his doctorate, and many awards and commissions. His scores range as an exploration of many genres, including jazz and gospel and classical, and he especially loves the music of Beethoven and Brahms. He has been described as a young composer on the rise with an ear for social justice and is currently the composer in residence at the Kennedy Center and an assistant professor of music at Georgetown. Another tribute to him that I really liked reading is that he is an artist whose windows are thrown wide open to the world. In 2023, he was a Grammy nominee for an album called Requiem for the Enslaved in the Best Contemporary Classical category. And it was a tribute to stories of 272 enslaved men, women, and children who were sold in 1838 by Georgetown University. Highly recommend that for your listening. Fate Now Conquers was composed for the Philadelphia Orchestra and scheduled for a March 2020 premiere. But the emerging COVID health crisis led to a cancellation, as so much else was canceled in the world. The premiere occurred on a digital platform, and the world paid attention. And this piece, Fate Now Conquers, is already recognized and has led to many new and important commissions and music and other tributes. It's masterfully orchestrated and inspired by a journal entry in Beethoven's notebook of 1815. Iliad, the 22nd book Beethoven wrote. But fate now conquers. I am here, and yet not she shall share in my renown. That life is left to every noble spirit, and that some great deed shall beget, that all lives shall inherit. Simon reflected, using the beautifully florid harmonic structure of the second movement of Beethoven's Seventh Symphony, I have composed musical gestures that are representative of the unpredictable ways of fate. Jolting stabs coupled with an agitated groove with every persona, frenzied arpeggios in the strings that morph into an ambiguous cloud of free-flowing, running passages depict the uncertainty of life that hovers over us all. We know that Beethoven strived to overcome many obstacles in his life and documented his aspirations to prevail despite his ailments. In the end, it seems that Beethoven relinquished to fate. Fate now conquers. An annotator by the name of Nick Dobrev summarized, this music conveys a sense of longing, hope, and the complex interplay between free will and the external forces that shape our lives. Featuring rich orchestration, intricate harmonies, and poignant melodies, listeners will be transported into a world of drama and philosophical contemplation. This piece stands as a testament to Simon's skill as a composer and his ability to create music that not only engages the intellect, but stirs the soul. Fate Now Conquers will open our 2024-2025 season. Next on the program is an amazing work by Rachmaninoff, Russian triple threat in the 20th century. Incredible pianist, amazing composer, and a fantastic conductor. His family had aristocratic roots, and when the revolution happened in Russia in 1917, his family, what remained of it, was in great jeopardy for their lives. And he recorded that he left with one small suitcase to Scandinavia with the rest of his family with similar packings, and his suitcase was full of musical scores. They rode a train and then a sleigh to Sweden in a raging snowstorm and safety. After a year, they came to the United States, and in the 1920s and 1930s, he made more money as a pianist than he would have as a composer or conductor. So that's where he put his focus. So he toured a lot. He had residences in New York and then LA, but always yearned to return to Russia. But they knew they could never go back. He didn't compose for 15 years, but then he wrote the work that we will hear at our concert. At his Swiss home near a lake where he could write but also enjoy boating and gardening. A historical note that I find really fascinating about him physically: he was a very tall, imposing man, and he had huge hands that could span 12 keys on the piano, which makes it extremely challenging for any of the mere humans who attempt to play his music at the keyboard from his time forward. So Rachmaninoff decided to focus on a theme and the idea of variations by rock star of the 18th century, Niccolò Paganini. While a teenager, Paganini had two goals: practice to become world-class violinist and escape the control of his domineering father. He practiced 11 hours a day, won contests, got a job in a theater as a violinist, and promptly ran away from home. He also discovered wine, women, and gambling. He was an incredible performer. If a string snapped, he would just refinger everything on 3 strings. Schubert borrowed money to hear him and said he left in a trance. Rumors flew that he was supernatural or had a deal with the devil, or had sold his soul to the devil. A vampire with a violin. He was tall and skinny and always wore black clothes. He had long black hair, quite the appearance on stage, very goth. He had also extraordinary joint flexibility. He wrote an incredible work called 24 Caprices for Solo Violin. And Caprice number 24, the final of the set, was a theme plus variations. Schumann and Liszt wrote their own variations for piano. So in 1934, Rachmaninoff wrote his final work for piano and orchestra. He said, "The composition is very difficult and I should start practicing it, but every year I get more and more lazy about finger work." This challenging and glorious work features one of the world's most beloved melodies and extraordinary orchestration. There are 24 variations. In the orchestral intro, there's a hint of the Paganini theme, and then the melody is played fully by the violins in variation number 1. The variations that follow have a wide variety of moods and styles and virtuosity. He also incorporates a famous theme that goes back for centuries called the Dies Irae, which is a theme about doom and damnation and death. But he incorporates this theme in an unabashedly romantic way. In addition to the theme itself, Rachmaninoff has shared that he was inspired to base the Rhapsody on Paganini's personality. He said, "Why not resurrect the legends about Paganini, who for perfection in his art and for a woman sold his soul to an evil spirit? All the variations which have the theme of Dies Irae represent the evil spirit. The minuet variation portrays the first appearance of the woman. There's then a conversation between the woman and Paganini. And by the time we get to variation 19, we have Paganini's triumph with diabolic pizzicato. As the piece nears its end, it sets up an expectation for a majestic conclusion, but its witty, deliciously satisfying surprise is to end a bit impishly with a whispered hint of the introduction. Pianists love playing this satisfying work, if they can handle the virtuosic part of it. Symphony players delight in the beautiful writing, and audiences love hearing it live. Legendary symphonic annotator Michael Steinberg summarized, "This piece has one of the world's most irresistible melodies, and it gives the audience the satisfaction of watching a pianist work very hard and with obviously rewarding results." The finale of our opening concert for our new season is by Tchaikovsky, Russia's leading composer in the 19th century. But in a letter to his brother around the time that he was to begin the work, he said that he was afraid his imagination had dried up and that he was written out. In the spring of 1888, he moved into a new house near Moscow, where he loved working in the yard and walking in the woods. He wrote to his legendary patroness, Nadezhda von Meck, "I'm past composing, might just focus on growing flowers." Yet he also said in the same letter he was starting a new symphony. We shall see. Symphony number 5 premiered in late 1888 in St. Petersburg. The audiences appeared to like it, but the critics were ruthlessly negative. And part of this could relate to the lack of preparation of the orchestra he had conducted, and he was very insecure about his conducting. Musicians, he said, scared him, and he would rush through rehearsals. After one more performance in Prague, he said, "It's a failure. There's something repellent in it, over-exaggerated color. Insincerely, the public sees this." But then there was a performance in Hamburg, and he wrote, "I like it better now." And part of the reason was Johannes Brahms, who attended a performance and had kind words for the composer. In a letter to his brother from Hamburg, Tchaikovsky wrote, "Brahms stayed an extra day to hear my symphony and was very kind. We had lunch together after the rehearsal and quite a few drinks. He is very sympathetic and I like his honesty and open-mindedness. Neither he nor the players liked the finale, which I also think rather horrible." But 2 weeks later, from Hanover, this harsh self-criticism had passed, and he wrote, "The Fifth Symphony was beautifully played, and I've started to love it. I was beginning to develop an exaggerated negative opinion about it." Like its predecessor, the stormy Fourth Symphony, the Fifth focuses on mankind's futile struggle with destiny. This is, however, a more spiritual work than the Symphony 4, and specifically it deals with man's spiritual helplessness and inadequacy. These thoughts are most evident in the finale, which opens very solemnly, but the entire symphony is filled with operatic crescendos and dramatic shifts in tempo, all of which bespeak a soul in torment, searching for catharsis. The extraordinary emotional immediacy of this work reaches listeners just right into the heart, a very personal connection. And there's a fate theme, an idea that is explored in every one of the 4 movements. And the source of this motive is from a vocal trio that Tchaikovsky had loved from Glinka's, another Russian composer, who had written an opera called A Life for the Tsar. Symphony number 5, in a bit of an outline, the fate motif starts us off. It sounds kind of like a Slavic folk song, and then there are lots of other new themes, and the development, in an unusual manner, develops some new material we haven't heard yet, so this wasn't a formulaic approach. The second movement has a luscious main melody, which was part of what became a pop love song in 1939. The tune was named Moon Love and includes a memorable horn solo, very sentimental and romantic. The third movement is a fabulous Tchaikovsky waltz, rich with tone colors. And the finale gives the emotional drama to lead us to a climax with the fate motif, mounting tension, then affirmation in a magnificent final moment. Annotator Laurie Schulman had a couple of observations that I thought worth sharing. The reception was particularly severe to this symphony in the United States, where the Boston Evening Transcript critic wrote, "Of the Fifth Tchaikovsky Symphony, one hardly knows what to say. In the finale, we have all the untamed fury of the Cossack, whetting itself for deeds of atrocity against all the sterility of the Russian steppes. The furious peroration sounds like nothing so much as a horde of demons struggling in a torrent of brandy, the music growing drunker and drunker, pandemonium, delirium tremens, raving, and above all, noise worse confounded." Well, somehow the symphony succeeded in transcending such journalistic mudslinging and winning a secure place in the repertoire. Its enormous popularity exists because of the emotional immediacy in Tchaikovsky's music. Is there any symphonic work more immediately moving and ingratiating than the Fifth? From the opening measures where the clarinet declaims a lugubrious Russian march, this symphony grips and retains our emotional involvement. Nowhere is Tchaikovsky less subtle, and nowhere is he more effective. And the waltz, a bow to Berlioz's similar ploy in the Symphonie Fantastique, also replacing the scherzo movement, is graceful and alluring, ever a reminder that Tchaikovsky was the greatest ballet composer of the 19th century. So there you have it, a brief overview of what I hope will be a memorable concert for all of you who will be in the Atwood Concert Hall experiencing this live. There's nothing like it. Your Anchorage Symphony, our music director Elizabeth Schultz, and you in the audience for an incredibly magical evening. Do not miss this, and I will see you in the concert hall.